The teller counted the bills twice before she looked up at me, and when she did, her face had changed into something careful. "Ma'am," she said, "I need you to hold on just a moment." She didn't slide the cash back under the glass. She set it to the side, like it belonged to someone else now, and she stood up. And she walked toward a man in a grey suit near the back offices, and I watched her lean in and say something I couldn't hear. I was 34 years old, standing in a branch I'd been walking into since I was in high school, trying to withdraw $800 from my own savings account, and a stranger had just decided I might be lying about who I was. The thing is, she was half right. Someone in that branch's records was lying about being me. It just wasn't the person standing at the counter. My name is Rachel Okafor, and for a long time I believed I was simply bad with money. That's the story I told myself. And it's the story my family told about me. And when everyone agrees on a story, it stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like weather. Something that just happens to you. If you're watching this and you've ever been handed a version of yourself you didn't recognize, but somehow started living inside anyway, stay with me, because it took a bank manager noticing one small thing before I finally understood what had actually been happening to my life. I want to tell you about my sister first, because you can't understand the money without understanding Danielle. Danielle is 2 years older than me. Growing up in Dayton, Ohio, she was the one people described as a lot, which in our family was a compliment. She filled a room. She remembered birthdays and threw the parties and cried at the right moments in movies and knew exactly what to say when our grandmother got sick. Our parents adored her, and I don't say that with bitterness anymore. Though for a long time, I couldn't say it without my throat tightening. Danielle was warm. That's the part nobody tells you about people like her. The warmth is real. That's what makes the rest of it so hard to see. I was the quiet one, the reliable one, which in a family is a polite word for the one who doesn't need anything. I got the scholarship. I moved to Columbus for a dental hygienist program, got licensed, got a steady job at a practice in the suburbs, and I built a small, careful life the way you'd build a shed in your backyard. Nothing impressive. Just mine. Or I thought it was mine. Let me take you back, because the beginning of this doesn't look like a crime. It looks like family. When I was 26, I got a call from my mother. Danielle was going through a hard time. Her marriage to a man named Kevin was falling apart, and she had a little boy, my nephew Theo, who was 3 then, and she needed help getting back on her feet. Could I co-sign something for her? A car at first. Just a car so she could get to work. I said yes before my mother finished the sentence. Of course I said yes. That's what you do for family, and beyond that, saying yes to Danielle had a feeling attached to it. A warm, approving feeling, like standing near a fire. When I helped her, I got to be close to that warmth. When I hesitated, the temperature dropped and everyone noticed, so I co-signed the car. And here's the first thing I didn't know then. Co-signing meant my information went onto paperwork. My social security number, my date of birth, my address history, my employer. Danielle sat next to me at that dealership and she watched the finance guy type all of it into his computer. And she was the one who filled out the form in her handwriting while I dug for my ID. I remember thinking she was being helpful. I remember being grateful she took charge of the boring parts. Because I hated paperwork. And she knew I hated paperwork, and she'd always known. The car went fine. She made the payments mostly. When she missed a couple, my credit took the hit, and my mother explained that Danielle was overwhelmed and I shouldn't make her feel worse about it, and I agreed, because making Danielle feel worse was somehow the one unforgivable thing in our family. A year later, there was a credit card. She said she needed an authorized user account to rebuild her credit, and could she add me, or could I add her? The details were fuzzy, and she explained them fast, the way she always explained money, in a bright, breathless run of words that made you feel rude for asking her to slow down. I said yes. Then there was a phone plan, then a store account for furniture when she moved into the apartment on Wayne Avenue. Each yes was small. That's the part I need you to understand. Nobody hands you a document that says, "Sign here to disappear." It happens one favor at a time, in the voice of someone who loves you, over years, until the pieces of your identity are scattered across a dozen accounts, and you couldn't say anymore which ones are truly yours. I started noticing things around age 30, small wrong notes. I applied to refinance my car and got told my debt-to-income ratio was strange, that there were accounts I didn't recognize. I called the number, sat on hold, and a representative read me a list. Some I knew, some I didn't. There was a store card in Cincinnati I'd never opened. When I mentioned it to my mother, she said Danielle had probably used my information by accident, filling out a form, that Danielle was terrible with details, and that it would be cruel to accuse my own sister of something over a mix-up. Cruel. That word did so much work in my family. I let it go. I want to be honest about that, because I know how it sounds. I had evidence sitting right in front of me, and I chose the explanation that let me keep my sister. I told myself I was being generous. Really, I was being afraid. Afraid of being the one who blew up the family. Afraid of what it would mean if the warmth had been a transaction all along. I called the store card company and disputed the account, and it took 4 months and a lot of forms, and it eventually got resolved, and I never told Danielle I'd done it. That's important. I fixed the leak quietly and said nothing, which meant that as far as she knew, nothing had gone wrong. I'd trained her, without meaning to, that using my name had no cost. The bill always got handled. The problem always went away. And the person who made it go away never even looked her in the eye. Now, let me tell you what pushed all of this into the light, because it wasn't courage. It was a mistake. Hers, and then almost mine. 2 years ago, I met someone. His name is Marcus. He's a middle school science teacher, divorced, calm in a way that used to make me suspicious because I'd never been around calm that wasn't hiding something. We got serious. We started talking about buying a house together, and that meant pulling my full credit report, the real one, all 3 bureaus, the whole thing laid out on our kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon with 2 cups of coffee going cold. I'd never actually looked at all of it at once. That's a confession. I'd dealt with problems one at a time, like swatting individual flies, and I had never once opened the window and seen the whole swarm. There were accounts going back 8 years. A personal loan from a credit union I'd never joined. 2 credit cards maxed near their limits. A medical debt in collections from a hospital in Dayton. From a date when I know for a fact I was in Columbus at work. And most of it traced back, when I started calling, to an address on Wayne Avenue. Marcus didn't say anything dramatic. He's not dramatic. He just looked at the medical collection for a while, and then he looked at me and asked quietly, "Rachel, whose apartment is this on Wayne Avenue?" And I couldn't answer him. My mouth wouldn't make the word. Because saying my sister's name in that moment meant admitting I'd known, on some level, for years, and had chosen not to know. Marcus watched me not answer, and something shifted in his face. Not anger exactly, but a kind of careful distance. And he said, "You already knew some of this." "Not like this," I said. "Not all of it. But some." "Some," I admitted. That was the hardest word I said that whole year, because it made me complicit in my own erasure. He didn't storm out. He got up, refilled his coffee, sat back down, and said, "Okay, then we figure out how bad it actually is." And I think that that's the moment I actually fell in love with him, though I didn't say so because it wasn't the moment for it. He didn't ask me to prove I hadn't done it. He just decided we were on the same side. We spent the next 3 weeks building a picture, not for revenge. At first, honestly, just to buy a house. But the picture kept getting bigger. The medical debt was the thing that broke something open in me. It was for a pediatric visit. Theo, my nephew, had needed treatment, an emergency room visit for his asthma, and the bill had been run under my name and my insurance information, or an attempt at my insurance information, and when the coverage got denied because I obviously hadn't been the patient's guardian, the balance had gone unpaid and eventually to collections. Under my name, my nephew. My sister had used my identity to try to cover her own son's medical care. I sat with that for a long time, and I want to describe the exact shape of what I felt, because it wasn't simple. Part of me was furious, and part of me, the trained part, the fire warmth part, thought, well, it was for Theo. It was for a sick kid. How can you be angry about a sick kid? And I realized that this was exactly how it had always worked. Every single time, there was a reason underneath the theft that made me the monster for objecting to it. The car was so she could work. The furniture was so Theo had a bed. The medical debt was so a child could breathe. Danielle had built her whole use of me on a foundation of the things I couldn't say no to, without becoming cruel. That's not an accident. That took intelligence. That took knowing me. I didn't confront her right away. I made a mistake first, and I'll own it. I called my mother. I told her I'd found accounts, real ones, with documentation, going back years. I told her about the loan and the cards and the collections. I was careful. I didn't yell. I laid it out like I'd have laid out a chart. And my mother's first question was, "Have you talked to Danielle about this?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "How much?" Have you talked to Danielle? Meaning, have you given her the chance to explain? Have you protected her? Have you kept this in the family? I said no. I wanted to understand it first. And my mother said, and I'll never forget the exact words, "Rachel, you know how she is. She doesn't think about consequences. She's not a criminal. She's just drowning. And you've always been the strong one. You've always been the strong one." Do you hear it? The compliment that's actually a job description. The strong one absorbs the damage. The strong one doesn't make a scene. The strong one pays. I got off the phone and I felt the old gravity pulling me back, the story reassembling itself. She's drowning, you're strong, be kind, be quiet, fix it, tell no one. I actually opened my laptop to start drafting a dispute letter I could handle privately, the way I always had, and I got about 2 sentences in before Marcus, who'd heard my half of the call, said one thing. He said, "If you fix it quietly again, you'll be doing this when you're 60. I closed the laptop. Here's where I want to tell you what my mother did after that call, because it's the part that changed the whole story for me. Within a day, Danielle called me, warm as ever. But she opened with, "Mom said you're stressed about some credit stuff, and I feel so bad because I think a lot of that is from when we shared accounts and my payments messed up your score, and I've been meaning to fix that." She'd been briefed. My mother had gone straight to her, and Danielle had already built the frame. This was a shared account misunderstanding, a scoring issue, my anxiety about credit. She was ahead of me. She'd been ahead of me for 8 years. And that's when I understood I couldn't handle this as a conversation, because a conversation with Danielle was a place where I always lost. She was better at talking than I would ever be. If I wanted the truth to survive contact with her, it couldn't be a feeling or an accusation. It had to be paper. So Marcus and I stopped talking and started collecting. I pulled every report. I ordered account statements where I could. I filed formal identity theft reports, which, if you've never done it, are not glamorous and do not produce instant justice. You fill out an FTC identity theft affidavit. You file a police report, which, in my case, a very tired officer in Columbus took down without much hope. You send certified letters to creditors. You wait. Weeks. It's slow and boring, and it does not feel like winning. It feels like homework. But something was happening as I did it. The story about me was dissolving. Every document I gathered was a small correction to a lie I'd lived inside. I wasn't bad with money. I had never been bad with money. I'd been carrying someone else's, invisibly, for a decade, and calling the weight my own weakness. Now here's the day at the bank, which I opened with, because it's where the whole thing finally cracked in the open, and it happened almost by accident. I'd gone in to close an old savings account, the one I'd had since I was 17, and moved the money to a new bank where I was starting completely fresh. Clean accounts, new numbers, everything locked down. 800 and change was all that was left in it. I asked to withdraw it in cash so I could carry it over myself, which is a normal, if slightly old-fashioned, thing to do. The teller pulled up my account, and something on her screen made her pause. She asked me to confirm my address. I gave her mine, in Columbus. She looked at the screen again. Then she asked me to confirm my phone number, and I gave it, and it didn't match either. Then she went and got the man in the grey suit, the branch manager, a soft-spoken guy named Paul, who I'd later learn had worked in bank fraud for 11 years before moving to branch management. Paul brought me into his office, apologized for the trouble, and explained gently that the contact information on the account, the address, the phone, and a secondary online banking login had been changed twice in the past few years, and the current information on file didn't match the ID I'd presented. He wasn't accusing me. He was doing the opposite. He said, "The person standing in front of me matches this ID and the original account opening from 2007, but someone updated this account's contact details in a way that doesn't match you at all. I flagged it because your signature card from 2007 is on file, and it's a very distinctive one, and the online profile someone built later didn't know that. Small thing. It's usually a small thing that doesn't line up." The signature? I'd signed my name the same over-careful way since I was 17, with a strange loop on the R that a childhood teacher had drilled into me. Whoever had reshaped my account online, resetting the login, redirecting statements to a date and address so I'd never see them, had done everything right except the one thing you can't fake, because you don't even know it exists. The physical card in a folder in a filing room, a loop on an R. The address the account had been redirected to was on Wayne Avenue. Paul asked me if I recognized it, and for the first time in 8 years, sitting in a stranger's office with a cardigan I'd owned since college and my mother's voice in my head telling me not to make a scene, I said the true sentence out loud to someone with the authority to act on it. "That's my sister's address," I said. "I didn't authorize any of these changes." He didn't gasp. He didn't call the police. Banks don't work like the movies. He calmly walked me through what it actually meant. A fraud flag on the account, a formal dispute, documentation, a process. He gave me my $800 in cash because the ID was mine and the money was mine. But before I left, he said something I've thought about ever since. He said, "For what it's worth, the fact that it took this long to surface usually means the person doing it was careful and close. Random fraud gets caught fast. This kind takes a while." He paused. "I'm sorry. This is often a family thing." I drove home and I didn't cry. I'd expected to cry. Instead, I felt something I can only describe as quiet, like a fever finally breaking. Now I had a choice about how to end it, and I want to be clear about what I chose, because I think a lot of people expect the confrontation to be the good part. It wasn't. It was the worst part. But it had to happen, and it had to happen with everyone in the room, because for 8 years the truth had only ever traveled through my mother, one distorted piece at a time, and I was done letting anyone edit it. I asked for a family dinner, my parents' house in Dayton, the house I grew up in, the kitchen that still smelled like the same dish soap it always had. My mother was thrilled. She thought I was coming to reconcile. Danielle came with Theo, who's 11 now and tall and funny and has no idea about any of this. And I want to say for the record that none of what happened is his fault, and I made sure the whole time that he was in the other room with a tablet and a snack. I brought a folder. Marcus came with me, but stayed quiet, in the living room, present but not performing. This wasn't his to carry. I didn't do a speech. The prompt in my head, the movie version where I stand up and deliver devastating lines, none of that happened. What happened was I put the folder on the table after we ate and I said, "I need to talk about some accounts," and I brought the documents so we're all looking at the same thing. Danielle's face did something immediate. The warmth flickered. She said, "Rach, is this the credit score thing again? Because I told you I'd help fix that." "It's not a score thing," I said. "It's a personal loan from Right Pat Credit Union I never opened. It's a hospital bill for Theo's asthma from 2019, run under my name and my insurance. It's a savings account you redirected to your address so I'd stop getting statements. The bank flagged it last week. There's a fraud investigation open now. I didn't open it to hurt you. It opened because the information didn't match me." My mother jumped in immediately, right on schedule. "Rachel, you don't need to make this into a police thing. This is your sister." "I know she's my sister," I said. "That's the only reason we're at a dinner table and not somewhere worse." Danielle started to cry, and here's the thing, the tears were real. I don't think she was faking. I think she genuinely felt overwhelmed and cornered and sad, and I think she also, in the same breath, could not stop working, because through the tears she said, "You have no idea how hard it's been. You have a steady job and no kids and a nice boyfriend, and you begrudge me a hospital bill for my son who couldn't breathe." And there it was again, the exact same move. Theo couldn't breathe, so how dare I? For 1 second, one full second, I felt the old pull, the gravity, the urge to say, okay, you're right, forget it, I'm sorry, let's move on. My hand actually moved toward the folder to close it, and then I didn't. "He couldn't breathe," I said. "So you took him to the ER, good. That's what a mother does. But you used my name and my insurance instead of your own. And when it got denied, it went to collections under me. And you never told me, and I found it 4 years later on my own credit report. Danielle, if you had ever once, one time, called me and said, 'I'm drowning, I used your name, help me fix it,' I would have. You know I would have. I always did. The problem was never that you needed help. It's that you decided I'd never find out. The kitchen was very quiet. My father, who had said nothing this whole time, who says nothing at most things, put his coffee down and looked at my mother, not at Danielle. And he said one sentence. He said, "How long have you known about this, Carol?" And my mother's face told the whole story before she said a word, because the answer was, a long time, longer than me. She'd known about at least some of it, the early accounts, the mix-ups. And she'd spent years managing me instead of managing Danielle, because it was easier to lean on the strong one than to hold the drowning one accountable. My father figured that out in real time at his own kitchen table, and something between them broke that is not, to this day, fully repaired. That was the reversal I never saw coming. I'd walked in thinking the story was me versus Danielle. The real story was that my mother had chosen, over and over, to protect the daughter who took from the family by sacrificing the daughter who gave to it, and had called that choice love. Here's what actually happened after, because I promised myself I'd tell you the real version and not the satisfying one. Nobody went to prison. I want to be honest about that. I did not press criminal charges, and I'll tell you why. And it's not because I forgave her. It's because Theo, Danielle, is his only real parent, and I decided I was not willing to be the reason an 11-year-old lost his mother, even a mother like this. That was my line. The banks and creditors ran their own fraud processes, which I cooperated with fully, and through those over about 14 months of paperwork and disputes and certified letters, the fraudulent accounts were removed from my credit, some faster than others. The medical collection was the last to go. My score, which had been dragging for years for reasons I'd blamed on myself, climbed almost 100 points once the weight that was never mine came off it. Marcus and I bought the house, small, 3 bedrooms, a maple tree in the front that turns unreasonable colors in October. I qualified on my own income and my own real credit, and when we signed the closing documents, I signed my name with that same distinctive loop on the R, and I thought about a folder in a filing room at a bank in Columbus, and a soft-spoken man named Paul who noticed one thing that didn't match. And I felt genuinely grateful to a stranger. Danielle and I don't talk much now. We're not fully no contact, but we're not what we were. And honestly, we were never what I thought we were, so I'm not sure what there is to mourn except a version of her that only existed in my willingness to overlook. She sent me a long message about 6 months after the dinner. It was warm. It was well written. It said she'd been in therapy, that she understood now, that she hoped we could rebuild. And near the end, folded in gently, was a line about how her car was having transmission trouble and things were tight and she knew I'd understand. I read it twice, the apology and the ask, in the same message, in the same warm voice. 8 years later, the exact same architecture, and I understood, finally, completely, that the warmth and the taking were not 2 separate things in Danielle. They were the same thing. The warmth was how the taking got in. I didn't respond with anger. I wrote back that I was glad she was in therapy, that I hoped it helped, and that I wasn't able to help with the car. 3 sentences, no explanation, no justification, no folder. For a woman who spent 34 years believing that saying no to family made her cruel, those 3 sentences were the hardest and freest thing I've ever written. My mother and I are slowly, carefully, finding our way to something. She has never fully admitted what she knew, and she may never, because admitting it would mean facing what she chose. My father and I are closer than we've ever been, built on that one moment he set his coffee down and asked the real question. Families don't resolve into clean endings. They resolve into new arrangements you learn to live inside. I keep the folder. I don't need it anymore. All the accounts are cleared. But I keep it in the bottom drawer of my desk. And every so often, when I catch myself sliding toward being the strong one who absorbs everything, the one who fixes it quietly and tells no one, I open the drawer and look at it. Not to stay angry, just to remember that for 8 years, I lived inside a story about myself that I never wrote and never agreed to, and that it took a stranger noticing one small loop on one signature to finally hand my own name back to me. If any part of this sounded familiar to you, if you recognize that warmth that always comes with a cost, I hope you'll hear the one thing I wish someone had said to me at 26. Loving someone was never supposed to mean disappearing so they could stay comfortable. You're allowed to keep your own name. If this story meant something to you, take a second to subscribe and let me know in the comments, because I read them, and I promise you're not the only one who's lived inside a story someone else was writing.